Licinius' advance was halted. Once again, the battle lasted until sundown without a decisive conclusion, and once again Licinius, who had lost something like 30,000 men in the fighting, withdrew under the cover of darkness. When morning came, though, Constantine was not able to immediately pursue his rival, because it appears that he had been wounded in the previous day's fighting, though the injury was not serious enough to keep him out of action for long. In contrast to his line of retreat following the Battle of Mardia, this time Licinius headed directly to Byzantium without stopping. Constantine was not going to fall for the same trick twice, so better to just play it safe. Once he got to Byzantium, Licinius followed the same pattern he established following his initial defeat at the Battle of Cibalae, and he appointed a man named Sextus Martinianus to the rank of Caesar. It wasn't exactly the same as appointing Valens Augustus, but it had the same effect. A key subordinate's loyalty was secured, and his army had another leader of imperial standing to help share responsibility for the war. After designating some of his troops to act as Byzantium's defense force, Licinius began ferrying the rest of his men across the Bosphorus with all haste, putting Martinianus in charge of the army on the far side. Licinius was confident that the navy he had posted in the Propontis would prevent Constantine's navy from ever entering the Hellespont, but he was not taking any chances. If Constantine's navy were somehow able to seize control of the narrow straits separating Europe from Asia, the Eastern Augustus knew he would be in big trouble. Better to just cross over to Bithynia now, and not worry about getting trapped in Byzantium. And it was a good thing he didn't take chances, because the coming Battle of the Hellespont was not going to go well for Licinius' navy at all. While he was gathering his army in the early summer of 324, Constantine had recalled Crispus from the Rhine frontier and ordered him down to the Greek port of Piraeus to take command of the navy assembled there. It was a good-sized fleet, 80 ships in all, but nowhere near the number Licinius had at his disposal. But Crispus, undeterred, sailed out towards the Hellespont anyway. His orders were to seize all the waterways between the Aegean and the Black Sea. When Licinius received word that Crispus was on the way, he ordered 200 of his ships down to blockade the straits of the Hellespont. The idea, of course, was that this force would overwhelm Crispus's smaller fleet. But in the narrow waters of the Hellespont, the larger numbers actually worked against Licinius' admiral. Crispus was able to deftly maneuver around the larger and more constrained enemy fleet, and he inflicted serious damage before Licinius. In the aftermath of the first naval battle, Crispus was reinforced, possibly by ships sailing around from Ravenna. And when he sailed further into the Hellespont to confront Licinius' navy, he now had something like 200 ships at his disposal. Licinius, desperate to prevent the sea lanes from falling into enemy hands, ordered his full force of around 350 ships to go down and sink the son of Constantine. This time, the two navies met near modern Gallipoli, and by all appearances, it looked like the stage was set for a great naval battle. But just prior to the engagement, a storm kicked up that hit Licinius' fleet particularly hard. The ships that were not run aground were badly damaged, and the crews were so battered that when Crispus advanced, the battle turned out to be little more than a mop-up operation. It is reported that only 4 of Licinius' ships escaped undamaged or uncaptured. The sea now belonged to Constantine. When Licinius found out what had happened, he ordered all the troops in the now indefensible Byzantium to abandon the city and get their butts across the Bosphorus on the double. With Martinianus guarding the coast, Licinius mustered the rest of his remaining troops and tried to figure out what he was going to do next. Constantine, meanwhile, could smell blood in the water and pressed his advantage hard. Using light transports to ferry his men across the Bosphorus, he was able to elude Martinianus and had the bulk of his army across before the new Caesar was able to do anything about it. Licinius then ordered Martinianus to abandon the coast and rendezvous with the rest of the army. Combined, they would make a stand at Chrysopolis, a fortified city a few miles north. But Constantine had guessed their plans, and with all the momentum going with him, he raced north and beat Licinius to the punch. In September of 324, the Eastern Augustus arrived at Chrysopolis, and he found Constantine waiting for him. Here now would be their final battle. Legend has it that at this point, Constantine had gotten so far inside Licinius's head that the Eastern Augustus had become convinced that the Labarum really did have magical properties. He ordered his men to avoid attacking whatever part of Constantine's army carried the standard, and then went even further, ordering his men to not even look at the magical talisman. One gets the feeling that Licinius was, at this point, already beaten. But that being said, the Battle of Chrysopolis was not at all a foregone conclusion. Both emperors were still excellent generals, commanding huge veteran forces. But as happened every time Constantine and Licinius met in the field of battle, eventually the tide turned against the Eastern Augustus. Constantine had not even bothered with clever tactics, and instead went straight for the jugular, ordering a full frontal assault that decisively broke Licinius's line. But Licinius, and oh man, are you as sick of hearing this as I am of saying it, once again managed to slip away, this time with a force of about 30,000 men. He drove headlong for Nicomedia and holed up inside the city, but when Constantine arrived shortly thereafter, it appears that the fight had finally gone out of the Eastern Augustus. Using Constantia as a go-between, the two emperors came to terms. Licinius and Martinianus were to surrender peacefully, and Constantine, giving in to his sister's begging, agreed to let them live. But that was the only concession he was going to make. The empire was now Constantine's, and Constantine's alone. For the first time in more than 40 years, Rome was ruled by a single man. The nasty little epilogue to this story, which I'll deal with now so we can get it out of the way, is that despite the solemn oath that he swore, it does not look like Constantine had any interest in letting his defeated rivals live. Initially, it appeared that everything was above board, as Licinius was taken to Thessalonica and Martinianus to Cappadocia, where they were both supposed to live out the rest of their days under something like house arrest. But after about a year, Constantine would decide that no one would really care anymore what happened to his beaten rivals, and so he ordered the execution of both. At least, that's what everyone assumed he did. They died under suspicious circumstances, and rumors later swirled that Licinius had been involving himself in a plot to overthrow Constantine, which, frankly, sounds an awful lot like the accusation that Maximian was involved in a plot to overthrow Constantine. And so most modern scholars believe that Constantine simply could not afford to let them live, and so, oath or no oath, he did not let them live. Licinius was about 60 years old, and had managed to survive as emperor for a very turbulent 16 years. Constantine also appears at this point to have ordered the execution of his nephew, Licinius the Younger, now maybe 13 years old. We can't have rival dynasties lying around now, can we? Constantine's sister Constantia was of course horrified, but it was just business, nothing personal. When Licinius died, the era of the Tetrarchy died with him. Diocletian had done his best to establish a system that would end once and for all the persistent civil wars that had racked the empire in the 3rd century, and instead he inadvertently had drawn up what amounted to a giant civil war tournament bracket. In the championship game, Constantine finally had emerged victorious. Next time, we will get into the ramifications of his victory. What would Constantine do now that he was the undisputed ruler of the empire? It is a question that will have to wait 2 weeks though, because, as many of you know, the History of Rome tours begin next Friday, and thus I will have no time to work on new episodes for a while. But, fear not, knowing full well that I would be taking this time off, I've been working double time lately, and have managed to get the next 3 episodes written and recorded and ready to go. So in the interest of not just cutting you off for the next 6 weeks, my plan is to remotely post an episode every other week while I'm gone. So that means that there will be a new release on May 15, May 29, and June 12, after which we will resume a normal schedule. that it's my intention to release the episodes on those dates, but given that I have no real idea what my internet situation will be like on any given day, the actual posting time might fluctuate a bit. But rest assured, the episodes are done, ready for your listening pleasure, and I will get them to you in a timely manner. So, live and in-person me will see you in about 6 weeks. Please be nice to pre-recorded me until I get back. This week's episode is brought to you by Audible. As you know, Audible is the internet's leading provider of audio entertainment with over 80,000 titles to choose from. When you're done with this episode, go to audiblepodcast.com/Rome. That again, audiblepodcast.com/Rome. By going to that address, you qualify for a free book download when you sign up for a 14-day trial membership. There is no obligation to continue the service, and you can cancel anytime and keep the free book download. You can also keep going with one of the monthly subscription options and get great deals on all future audiobook purchases. This week, I'm going to go with a recommendation from listener Sandy that may not seem like it has much to do with Roman history, but I swear there is a connection. Isaac Asimov's classic Foundation trilogy. If you like science fiction, it is required reading. Period. End of story. But what's the connection to Roman history? Well, Asimov was on his way to meet with legendary editor John W. Campbell to pitch a new story idea, but young Isaac had a problem. He did not yet have a new story idea. He was, however, in the middle of reading Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, so when he got to the meeting, he basically started making up a story about the fall of a galactic empire because it was the first thing that popped into his head. Campbell, of course, loved the idea, and the rest is psychohistory. Gibbon, the gift that just keeps on giving. Just remember to go to audiblepodcast.com/Rome so that they know who sent you. Hello, and welcome to the History of Rome. Episode 137, The Christian Emperor. In the autumn of 324 AD, the Roman Empire awoke to discover that for the first time in 40 years, the empire was ruled by a single man. Only the oldest members of the citizen body even had a memory of what that was like. The rest of the population had grown up in the shadow of Diocletian's tetrarchy, with its multiple emperors, multiple capitals, and multiple, sometimes conflicting, policies. Now everything, every issue, every decision, every order, was going to be funneled through a single man. Far from shying away from what was, for this generation at least, an unprecedented load of responsibilities, Constantine relished the opportunity he now had to reshape the empire in his own image. Like the greatest of the great Roman leaders who had preceded him, Julius Caesar, Augustus, Hadrian, Diocletian, Constantine came to power full of ideas, full of confidence, and full of energy. But more important than all of that, Constantine came to power with the fervent belief that he was the instrument of the Christian God, and it was now his duty to convert Rome to the one true religion. Though the empire would not officially become Christian until the reign of Theodosius, it was right here